What is a woman? A simple question, but one that in recent times often delivers a far from simple answer. Today, the federal court is being asked to decide once and for all.
Together we stand, together we fight.
The real criminals are the people in that building right there, which are seeking to deny and delay our rights.
Outside the federal court in Sydney, trans and women's rights activists chant.
They don't give a shit about us. It's all about how they feel.
Ahead of the first day of Tickle versus Giggle.
Let's go and get our rights back. Let's just use it, get our rights back and end this madness so we can all move on with our lives.
That's Sal Grover. In 2020, she founded an app called Giggle. Currently inactive, Giggle is marketed as a female-only social networking app that allows women to find flatmates, friends and offer emotional support. And this is Roxanne Tickle. In 2021, Roxanne was initially accepted and then denied access to Sal Grover's app.
The only prerequisite is that you are female. That's it.
Roxanne is a transgender woman. Although her sex at birth was male, in 2019 she underwent gender-affirming surgery. On her Queensland birth certificate, Roxanne is female.
If Roxy was on the Giggle app and she was harassing people or causing trouble, then there already exists laws to help make sure that that doesn't happen. But she's being excluded purely on the basis of how she identifies or who she is.
So Roxanne has taken Sal to the federal court, claiming discrimination on the grounds of gender identity. Sal says she created the app after suffering sexual assault.
The reasons for female-only spaces have not gone away. So we should not be in a position to have to justify them. I'm sick of when people go, but why do you need a female-only space? Because we want them.
In 2013, the Sex Discrimination Act was amended, providing new protections against discrimination on the basis of a person's sexual orientation, intersex status and gender identity.
It is a shame that those across from us think that the greatest threat that there is to women is other women. Well, I call bullshit.
This is the first time that a case alleging gender identity discrimination will be heard by the federal court.
If, for whatever reason, it was to go in the favour of Giggle and that the anti-discrimination law was amended, then trans people would see a rollback of the kinds of protections that have allowed us to go on and live our lives the way that everyone else lives their life.
The landmark trial due to last 4 days.
The person has a penis, he's a man.
Trans rights are under attack. What do we do?
Stand up, fight back.
Sydney Morning Herald columnist Parnell McGuinness has been following this case and reports extensively on women's rights. Joins us now. Parnell, has Roxanne Tickle been discriminated against?
In a way, you know, that's the least interesting question in this case because we all discriminate against one another and for one another all the time. You know, we discriminate when we make friends and we discriminate when we choose spouses. So I think the word discriminate in this case is being used in a loaded way, which means that somebody is being excluded. In fact, what is happening here in this case is Sal Grover is really up against Roxanne Tickle to establish whether natal women born as women, are allowed to have a self-identity in the same way that trans women can have an identity that belongs to them. Right.
Well, we use the term discrimination here because that is the legal locus of the inquiry. That's what the case is ultimately about, is whether or not this has fallen foul of discrimination law. And I guess the problem is that the app is built for women. It doesn't identify natal women, as you put it, as a separate category and create something for them. What's interesting, it seems to me, is that in every other legal and official context, Roxanne is recognised as a woman. Doesn't that in the end bind the court? Doesn't the court kind of have to say, well, she has to be considered a woman in this case?
And it likely will, because that is the definition of woman now in the Australian law. And Sal Grover is essentially what she's doing is she is fighting to have that redefined as a biological woman, so that sex by birth will have a status of its own and you'll be able to discriminate on that basis. So Sal entirely expects this to go to the High Court, which is where a challenge which will essentially come down to the Constitution would be taken.
Parnell, why has this become such a toxic issue?
Well, of course, conflicts of rights always are toxic issues, aren't they? I mean, you know, think about there's an archetypal conflict of rights that I used to bring this home to people. Abortion is one of those. You know, a woman, when she gets pregnant, if she doesn't want to be pregnant, then there are two people who are instantly in a conflict of rights. And the way that Australia navigates that is we have the trimester scenario, where in the first trimester we say, OK, the rights are entirely with the woman whose body it is. In the second trimester, we say, look, things are getting a little bit more complicated here. So we're going to mediate using laws. And in the third trimester, we say, well, at this stage, this is a fully formed human being, and we're going to give it rights because it can't survive without the mother's body. And it is, however, you know, a self-standing person. So that is how we've navigated this particular conflict of rights. And, you know, they are always dramatic and they are always subject to challenge. You know, people feel like the balance of rights should be different in all of these cases. But that's essentially what we're doing here. There are these two groups who most of the time can coexist very happily, but in some cases, some people feel like they should be able to carve out a bit of space for themselves.
I guess where that conflict becomes really difficult, particularly for, in this case, would be for trans women, is that there's a claim of recognition that they're trying to make that reflects a claim that I guess in most cases they've been wanting to make their whole lives, and a recognition they've been seeking their whole lives. So do you see how, like, it just ends up being hopelessly combustible, doesn't it? Because to make any exception to that, I'm sure must strike them as cutting to the quick.
I have so much sympathy for that. You know, this is the problem in this case, right? That it is completely understandable to look at somebody who has had this conflict all of their life and want to reach out to them and say, yes, I understand you, this is how you feel, and all of our compassion is there for you on that basis. The only question is, why shouldn't that same compassion be extended to biological women who feel literally very viscerally what it is to be a woman from their perspective? So the question is why biological women don't have as much of a right to an identity as trans women have a right to an identity, and a deeply felt one at that.
Parnell, we appreciate your time. Thank you.
Pleasure.